Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, I know we're excited about this. I'm excited about this. We're here at Melbourne Business School.
Yep.
First time we've filmed here. It's quite cool. I'm looking forward to them developing all of this, and I think you're probably going to be one of the people that benefits from it. But let's not worry about that. Let's talk about you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience as to who you are and what your business does and is called?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Joey Moshinsky. I'm one of 3 founders at Tutero. And at Tutero, we're building a range of digital education products to connect with and optimize every minute of STEM teaching and learning.
Cool. And you said it twice now, so I'm going to have a crack at it. Tutero, right?
Tutero.
I just didn't want to say it first.
You got it.
I won't remember it tomorrow, but that's okay.
That's all right.
All right. So let's sort of talk about how long you've been in existence. How long has it been going?
So we've probably had the ideas in our heads as a founding team for about 2 years now, but we've really only been in motion for 18, 20 months.
Okay, that's still a fair bit of time.
Yeah.
And where are you at to now, before we sort of go back into the history of it, where's the business at right now?
Where's the business? So we sort of spent our first 9 months figuring out exactly what problem to solve and the best way to go to market. So there was a number of pivots and even a rebrand in there. And then we launched our first education product, data-driven tutoring, in January this year. We've been growing about 50% a month since we launched that. And we actually just completed our seed round about a month ago.
Exciting. And now I know what it is. The name makes a lot more sense. You see, this is the problem of not knowing what the business does before we start the show. All right. So let's talk about you first before we sort of get to your founding team. So
sure.
You're pretty young. What's sort of gotten you into entrepreneurship, starting your own business? You know, where do you think that came from? Did it come from parents? Did it come from something you saw? Do you think it was just the way you wanted to live? Or how's that become you, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always had an inclination that I wanted to go into entrepreneurship at some point in my career. It's probably happened a little bit earlier than I may have planned 5 or 6 years ago.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I absolutely think it's a good thing. It all really started during COVID. Because my brother and I were living under the same roof.
Yep.
And I think we'd run out of things to talk about. So we started discussing our respective experiences with maths education.
Wow, you really had run out of things to talk about.
And the worst part is this is like 2, 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. We're literally just standing around the whiteboard in his room, just having a yarn. And we sort of had 2 different perspectives on a problem. And that allowed us to sort of validate there was a problem space, and one thing turned into another. We sort of started building, fell in love, and then I had kind of a grad job that I've now said no to, and so we're really focused on building this.
You didn't even start the job?
Yeah, I didn't start the job, and my brother's now dropped out of university as well.
Crikey. And you got a third founder?
Yeah.
Was that another flatmate, or was that just someone you pulled in after COVID?
So Richard and I had actually been working together at a previous startup, and I was like, wow, this guy's really talented. So Sonny and I got to know him really well, and the story is we called him up. We're like, all right, we'd love for you to come join. Richard's our CTO, and he said, yep, I'm absolutely in. Within 10 minutes, on the condition that we delete 25,000 lines of code that Sonny had written and start again on a new stack. So, yeah, that's Richard. He has high conviction in the way he thinks about technology.
He certainly does.
Yeah.
So one, you're probably the first person to admit you ran out of things to talk about during COVID. No one's ever said that to me before. I really like that you admitted that, particularly with a family member who you're not supposed to run out of things to talk about with. But anyway, the fact you ended up on maths is fascinating. Okay, so you've just completed a seed round. You've obviously got customers.
Yep.
How did that sort of eventuate from you coming up with the idea during COVID, obviously getting your third co-founder on? How did you go from there? What did you do? I think a lot of people are always interested on, you know, people who haven't started a business always think the starting's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And I think probably it is until you've done it, and then it was the easiest thing in the world. So maybe give us a little talk through how that played out for you guys.
Yeah, so we started with a problem that gaps form in maths education, and because the subject is naturally cumulative, that they compound over time.
Right, makes sense.
So we had an understanding of the problem space, and we had high conviction that the future of maths education was going to be more data-driven, it was going to be more enjoyable for students, and that's going to lead to sort of greater learning efficiency and learning outcomes. And so we knew that there was opportunity somewhere in this region, and I think we sort of first had the hypothesis that we could empower a range of other education providers by producing like a B2B SaaS product.
Yep.
We quickly learned that that was probably one too many stakeholders in the wider piece, in the sense that you have tutors, students, parents, and now this other organization that you need to bring together. And so we quickly learned that going direct to consumer to begin with and marrying our software with a tutor was where we could deliver the greatest learning enhancement.
Yeah.
And so collecting insights along the first 9 months sort of informed that evolution and that pivot towards what we are today. And ever since we've launched, we've seen how impactful our software can be in terms of educational delivery. And that's allowed us to really expand our ambition and form a strategy that will allow us to connect with every education touch point, not just supplementary education.
Okay. And did you just go out and build it? Did you join a program? Did you go and get a co-working space? Literally, what was that? Where was the moment where you suddenly sort of became your own business?
Yeah. So the first, I have very, very distinct memories of the first 3 to 4 months. It was the founding team sitting around the kitchen table.
It's the old kitchen table story. Brilliant. We don't get enough of these days.
Literally the kitchen table. We were originally called Math Gaps, and we printed out like 5 posters of Math Gaps and put them all around the room.
That was day one.
That was day one. And so we sat there reading maths textbooks and writing our first lines of code for about 3 months.
Cool.
And then we kind of, at that point, we had validated our MVP, and we had the confidence to come full time. Then we got a co-working space.
Yep.
And sort of
from there.
Went from there. An interesting thing though, we're now a much bigger team, but we're still almost entirely a virtual company.
Yep.
So we have team members all around the world. And we have a virtual office, which is almost like a 2D metaverse, where everyone has their own Sims characters. We have meeting rooms, we have desks. So yeah, it's funny how the shape of our office has changed over time.
And so those people all around the world, are they literally all around the world?
So we've got bases in the Philippines and in India.
Yep.
And we've also got team members in Nigeria, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And
how's that go time-wise? Are those time zones okay? I think there's some tricky ones in there, aren't there? Yeah, Nigeria is definitely the trickiest. It actually works well. A lot of our software engineering team and the product team are based in the IST time zone, Indian Standard Time, which is perfect for Sunny and Richard, my co-founders, who are software engineers and natural night owls, so they get to sleep until 11 every day, and they've found their perfect jobs. And that's why you're on the show this morning, and they're not, right? Because I'll be fair to them. They're now waking up at 9. They'll listen to this and they'll have a crack at me. Yeah, they're waking up at 9. Okay, so where are you in terms of the funding? Like you've said, you've completed your seed round. How did you go about that? Because I think those first early stage rounds of funding are incredibly difficult, and you've got literally no idea. And it's a very difficult process, and I think it's a process that most founders just have to learn. Like there's a gap. There isn't really any education around how to go and get funding in the very, very early days. So how did you guys go about that? Did you get lucky? Did you have someone that you knew, or what's the sort of history behind that? Yeah, so I think we've been really, really lucky in the sense that we've had great mentors around us supporting the capital raise process, people that have been working in finance and M&A for a long period of time. And we've also have really good relationships with our early investors who backed us from the very start and then have continued to support our journey. Yep. And were they family, friends kind of investors, or were they more, did you get them through, mentor is an interesting word because people often say to me, where do I get a mentor? Yeah. It's a very difficult question to answer. So where did yours come from? How did that come about? Yeah, so our mentors are a combination of family and family friends. Yep. And then they had relatively good networks into a family office, and they were some of our original investors. Okay, great. Yeah, that is lucky. Yeah, that's good. Very lucky. But I think if you communicate well with your investors, it as you now realise, once you've raised one round, you're doing it forever, right? Until you exit. And so I think the better the relationship you can develop with your investors early on, and staying in contact with them and having them in kind of a mentorship role is going to only benefit you. Because I think some founders think they go and get the money and they don't have to talk to them anymore, which is very much not the case.
Yeah.
And you almost need to be planning for the next round straight away as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're really lucky that we've raised a pre-seed last year, and then that allowed us to implement systems around investor relations and reporting. And I feel like all of the new investors that came into this round saw the work that had been done in that regard and looked towards it as a positive signal, and it gave them more confidence to back us.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about that reporting, because not a lot of people talk about that on this show. I mean, I think a lot of people don't want investors because they don't want the accountability.
Yeah.
And yet, I think the accountability is probably what drives you forward. Yeah. So how did you find that? Because one of the dreams of being an entrepreneur or founder is having no accountability, so to speak, other than yourselves or between yourselves. But then when you do get investors, you do have that to some degree. How did you find that? Because it doesn't necessarily make you like an employee, but I think it depends how you frame it yourself as to how effective it is to you in terms of being a good thing or a bad thing. Did you think it helped you drive forwards in a clearer direction because you had to tell them what you were going to do? You didn't necessarily have to do it, but you had to tell someone. Does that make you self-accountable?
100%. I think it's very healthy to have high degrees of accountability and an element of stress in work. Obviously not overwhelming stress, so it starts to damage your well-being, but you need to get up in the morning with a bit of fire in your belly, and we as a whole team get up and say, all right, we need to go do this work now because we've released a range of forecasts, and we want to be able to hit those forecasts because that's a really important stepping stone towards realizing our wider vision and purpose. And so I'm really grateful for the accountability that comes from having external investors and having that degree of pressure. Yeah.
And have you sort of expanded that into the team? Because one of the problems that a lot of people do have when they go and get these virtual teams is accountability and measuring that and keeping that on top. And some people just have a meeting each week and that's all they do. Other people have stronger systems. Do you think that accountability ethos lives within your business now?
Absolutely. So as a founding team, we look at it really mathematically.
Strangely.
Yeah. So we've got composite metrics that are the core elements of our forecast for investors, and then you can break them down into their component variables. And then the way I think about sort of leading a team is allocating certain variables to different teams within the wider organization and different individuals. And so when I look towards our team and I say, hey, these are our objectives, that's all about owning a metric and ensuring that we get that metric to a position or better such that we can realize our wider goals.
Okay. Now I've got an interesting twist on this for you. So it's obvious you're fairly mathematical. By the sounds of it, if you're chatting to your brother about it at 2 a.m., he is. And then you've got a technical co-founder.
Yeah.
How are you selling the damn thing? How are you marketing it? How are you going to market? Because that's a very different brain to the side of mathematics and coding. So how have you overcome that problem?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. So I'm our head of growth at Tutero, so that all falls under my remit.
Yep.
Sales, marketing, growth, product. I would say that to be successful in those areas, you need a whole lot of creativity and you need to understand consumer psychology. But increasingly, as a higher percentage of our channel mix are digital, I would argue that being quite quantitative and data-driven is a very important component of the wider system. And so we are increasingly trying to make all of our decisions based on the data and less on intuition. Yep. It's hard. It's really, really hard, but I feel like it's almost a competitive advantage for us as a growth unit.
Look, I think you're right. I think data-driven decisions are great in any respect, but you've also kind of got, do you consider it a B2C or do you consider it a B2B2C because you're kind of using the tutors as well? Are you doing both? Are you hitting both markets?
So currently we're B2C. So our first product is, data-driven tutoring, and we've got the demand side and the supply side, the supplier side being our tutoring team. Over the next 9 months, we're releasing 2 more product lines, and they're going to be essentially lesson planning software for teachers and a gamified learning app for students. And they're going to be distributed bottoms up through schools. And so we're across our product mix, we're going to have a mixture of B2C and B2B.
Yeah. So let's talk about the lesson planning one, because that's not something I've not heard a product like that before, not in the startup world. So, I mean, I understand the concept of lesson planning, but how are you going to get that into a school? Is it literally a school by school? Are you going to, I mean, is it for every teacher to use? Is it going to be an individual teacher's choice? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the way we are approaching our go-to-market in schools is bottoms up and teacher first. So traditionally, the go-to-market into school systems has been sort of a top-down sales motion into schools.
Which is long and arduous, I believe.
Exactly. And schools are largely budget constrained. And so there's a number of challenges with that go-to-market. So we're really thinking about it a little bit differently and saying, how can we provide an incredible amount of value for free for teachers and let that disseminate within a classroom? And then within a school. And then once you reach that critical mass, then there's other opportunities for monetization through supplementary education. And then you add that top-down sales motion a bit later.
That's going to be interesting to see how that pans out.
Look, there's inherent challenges, but we're confident that product-led growth is sort of the most scalable and exciting growth opportunity at the moment. And as an organization, we have high conviction in the products that we're building, and we're confident we can get to that point of product market fit where it becomes a real opportunity for us.
Look, I can't even imagine. There's got to be a million teachers out there who would love products that can help them, particularly if they're freemium, right? And then they're going to talk about them because they've got nothing else to talk about. Like, when they sit in the staff room, it's going to be a question that's going to come around. So I could think that could really work. And sorry, the other product was a gamified. Remind me?
Yeah. So essentially, what our lesson planning software will allow teachers to do is perform diagnostic assessment across their classroom. Identify the optimal teaching pathway to teach their class when in aggregate, but also set highly personalized individual tasks to every student. And those tasks will be set on a gamified learning platform so that students are always learning the skills that they need in a really engaging and fun fashion. And so quite a tangible example of how this would play out is currently teachers, when setting homework, will say, all right, students, go complete chapter 3C, and everybody go focus on that, and then show me your answers in the workbook tomorrow. But what Tutero software will allow teachers to do is instead set 30 minutes of personalized homework to every student, such that they're targeting the exact gaps, the exact deficiencies that are blocking their learning pathways. And we not only, we're confident that will not only improve the amount that students learn, but it will also be a much more engaging experience because they're not disengaging with content that's too easy or becoming frustrated with content that's too difficult.
I find this really interesting. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and one's very studious and the other one not so much, as is always the way. We struggled with the one not so much, with the exact kind of workbook homework you talked about. We actually ended up getting him a tutor with a slightly older person from the same school. And that really worked because, I don't know, there's the relatability, and it was more fun than me doing it or just sitting there on his own doing it with them. So, I can see how that's really super interesting. Okay, well, I can't wait to see how that pans out. I hope he hasn't left school by the time you get it out there. But all right, so let's talk about, that's the next 9 months. What's your sort of goal as a group? Because it sounds like you're quite clear on where you are now, where you've come from, and where you're going in the short term. But everyone who has a business has a dream, so to speak. What's the dream for you? Is it taking this as globally, literally? Because obviously education's in different countries, particularly somewhere like Nigeria, right? It's very different to someone like Australia. What are your thoughts on that?
So our purpose as an organization is to connect with and optimize every minute of STEM teaching and learning. And so it's a big purpose statement because every minute means every student at every education touch point.
At every level.
At every level, within the STEM subject range. And so we're going to continue building products and entering markets and forming strategy with that purpose in mind.
Yeah.
And obviously in the near term, it's out of reach. It's a very challenging and ambitious objective, but we're confident that if we continue to focus on each of the key stakeholders, students, teachers, parents, and schools, and are very customer-led in terms of how we design product, then software is incredibly scalable and it's possible.
And so is STEM. When you think about it, out of all the things you could learn, like STEM is probably the easiest one that you can take globally compared to languages or religion and all those other kind of things. Okay. What's the hardest thing for you that you've had to go through during this journey, and what's the hardest thing you've gone through as a business? I want to know, your journey's been going 2 years or so. You seem to have an extraordinary amount of success so far, which is amazing. What's been the most difficult thing to overcome from a company perspective? But then you personally, and I'm sort of talking about your psyche in terms of how you've gone through that.
Yeah, so it's a really great question. As a company, I think the year between launching and then getting our first dollar of revenue was really difficult.
Yeah, because there's no money.
There's no money. We hadn't really achieved much validation. There was high opportunity cost of our time, and so we were facing external pressure, questioning whether we were doing the right thing and taking the right approach to our life design almost. And so that was really challenging. And by the end, we'd all been working so hard, so tirelessly that we really burned out. So there was a period there that I reflect on that was particularly tough, but I feel like because we've been through that experience, every time we face a challenge now, we have greater levels of perseverance. And I think as a founding team, we're really comfortable with overcoming adversity.
Well, you can always draw on it, right? You can go back, this is as bad as that was, so can't be that bad.
Absolutely. And I think that perseverance and the ability to overcome adversity are some of the key traits that you need in a founding team.
100%.
Being able to frame problems as opportunities and being able to get up day after day, no matter how many knocks you've taken. If you can continue doing that for a prolonged period of time, that's when you'll be able to achieve something really cool.
Well, I like to say you only fail when you stop trying, right? And I think you're right. That framing problems as opportunities sounds so simple. Some days it's just not that easy to do. And was there anything that you personally have felt that's been tough for you? Because I'm sure it's along similar lines, but there is a lot of doubt as a founder, and that doesn't go away. I talk to founders who've built and sold businesses that are worth hundreds of millions, and they still have the same doubt in their new ventures. What's been the hardest thing for you personally, do you think?
So I think there's probably, there's been two really challenging things. The first is having the conviction in our purpose as an organization to say no to other opportunities. And I mentioned it before, but there's an opportunity cost associated with that. And you have a lot of people in your life who believe in sort of structured pathways advising you to go do that for a few years and then come back at a later time and build something after you have that experience and have that CV item. So I think that was a real challenge. And then more operationally, a challenge has been because as a founding team, we don't have that past professional experience. We've had to, we don't have a sense of operational benchmarks, and we've had to figure most things out from first principles.
That can be a good thing too,
it can be a weapon or a tool within our toolkit. Yeah.
And how do you find the dynamics between the two? I always like it. Family. The one thing I love about families when they start founding businesses together, and it can obviously you've got a third wheel in there, but is that I see the biggest problems occur with co-founders when they're not honest with each other. And that happens with people who aren't family. Family is very honest with each other. So that problem disappears because no one's more honest. Now, that has other problems that can potentially lead on from that, but I actually think it's a massive strength. So, you've obviously got that with your brother. How have you found that with your other? Have you found it's just sort of expanded into the three of you? Because you guys are so honest, he's probably more comfortable being just as honest with you guys as well, and vice versa, I would hope.
Absolutely. I think some of the most important elements of a founding team, one is deep trust in all of the relationships. And Sonny and I obviously have that. We've been brothers for a little while now. And I think Richard has this incredible ability to listen and then provide really considered responses and be honest with his feelings in an incredibly non-judgmental way. And I think because we've been working so closely with him and because he approaches work and relationships in that way, I've been able, Sonny as well, we've both been able to grow like to an incredible level of trust with him.
Yeah.
I know we'll be very, very close friends and partners for a long, long time. So feel very privileged to have that level of trust across our founding team. And I think the other element of our founding team that I love is we have very different skill sets and different way of approaching problems and approaching work.
Yep.
I'm probably a little bit more creative. Sonny is very systems oriented. And Richard's probably somewhere in the middle. And that leads to clashes sometimes, but it has also meant that we've been able to capture the best elements of each of our work styles and bring them together and embed them across the company.
Clashes are good. Clashes are good, as long as they don't explode.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, last question, and this is going to be useful for you as you continue to expand, because you can take this little piece of video and use it. But in your own words, why would someone want to come and join you guys? Why would someone come and want to work with you guys? If you're speaking to someone out there who, there'll be a stage where you grow again, I'm sure. And if someone's watching this, tell them in your own words, why would they want to come and work with you?
So I think there's two key reasons. The first is we're an incredibly purpose-oriented organization.
I can see that.
And so anyone who is passionate about building the future of education can come join our team and let that and apply that passion to the work that they do every single day.
Yep.
The other reason that I would encourage people to come join Tutero or at least get to know us is we have a cultural value that work should be designed around life and not the other way around. And so we've embedded an incredible amount of flexibility into work for every one of our team members, and we try to make our workplace as collegiate, friendly, and supportive as possible. I know that going to work does not feel like going to a traditional office. It feels like you're spending time with a team of incredibly talented and passionate people every single day trying to build something that they really care about and that we really care about.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Joey, mate, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really impressed with what you've done. I still can't say the name. I'm not even going to try again. But I think it's amazing. And we will certainly look forward to getting you back on the show in a year and a half to see how it's all going. And good luck.
Thank you so much. I'd love to have a conversation again. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.